my name is Dennis Sharpe, and I'm going to demo JHipster 2. The first thing I want to do is make a brand new directory, and then also make a new directory for my workspace. Then I'm going to change into the new directory I created, and the first step is to install Yeoman. The next step is to install the actual generator. So the last step is to actually run the JHipster generator. So you're going to get some questions. What do you want to name the application? What's your default package? Do you want to use Java 8 or Java 7? What kind of authentication would you like to use? You can use a regular HTTP session authentication, OAuth 2, or token-based. I'll just pick HTTP session for now. Which type of database? Do you want to use a SQL database or no SQL database? I'll choose SQL. Which production database would you like to use? Right now supports MySQL or Postgres. I'll choose MySQL. And then for development, would you like to use an in-memory database or go ahead and use a MySQL database? We'll start with just using in-memory. Do you want to use second level cache? You can say no. You can say yes with EH cache or Hazelcast if you wanted to do a distributed cache. I'll just go with EH cache for now. Do you want to use clustered HTTP sessions? No. WebSockets? No, not right now. Do you like to use Maven or Gradle? I prefer Maven. Grunt or Gulp? I'm going to use Grunt. And then would you like to use the Compass CSS authoring framework, which I will not. So right now, JHipster is generating an entire project for me that I can run right away inside Eclipse. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and open Eclipse inside our blank workspace. So what this is doing is creating a Maven project that I can import directly into Eclipse, and it also so it creates a Java code, it creates the AngularJS code, some unit tests, things of that nature. Okay, so that's done. We can now import Maven project. You see the POM show up here. Now the project will be imported into Eclipse. With my Eclipse install, the initial load will result in some errors, which are from the node modules. So they're just JavaScript validation errors, and they can safely be ignored. So I'm just going to delete these. So what you'll see is you have a full project set up. Your source code is here in different packages. There's some resources, config files, and the like. Some unit tests, test resources. And here you'll find the AngularJS code that runs the default application. So we'll show you how easy it is from the command line. I just typed in 3 different commands, come into Eclipse. I can open up the main application and run it as is. What I did there is run as Java application. And here you see it started up. Here we are. This is the application running that was generated. So I can show you a few of the screens that come out of the box with JHipster. First thing I'm going to do is log in with an admin account. On the menu here, there's an entities option, which is empty. We'll discuss that later. There's account. You can change your account name and email here. Password. You can put in a new password. It will tell you if your password is strong enough. The sessions tab here will show any of your active sessions if you have multiple sessions going. You can also invalidate those sessions, only your own. You can log out here. And then there's a whole slew of administration screens that come out of the box. There's a metrics screen that lets you see how the JVM is doing, HTTP requests, statistics on the services, how many times they're called, how long they take to run, cache, hits, data source. We have a simple health screen, which is basically doing like a ping on your database, or in this case, email is down because I didn't configure an email server. Configuration, here you can change property values. And you can look up property values, filter them. Audits, so there's built-in auditing, an audit table. These are entries from the audit table, and you can filter these entries by date. Logs are where you can change the log level at runtime for your packages. So this could be useful in production if you needed to turn on debug temporarily to address a production problem. We have this API page generated by Swagger that shows all the REST operations that you have. And also you can test the operations. You get full documentation on what kind of response you're expected to get back, what the different response codes are. You can actually try it out live and get a real response for my admin user. You can connect to a database, perform operations there. And last but not least, you can change the language. You see changed up here. There's an internationalization built in to JHipster, so you can create JSON files with whatever language that you need for any labels and text on the pages. There's also a feature you can use called grunt. That opens up a new browser tab, and that's going to be live and refresh automatically when you make changes. So for instance, you could change some text. I'm going to change this to say, welcome Java Hipster 2. And that automatically refreshed because I'm running the grunt server. I'm going to kill that now. The next thing I'm going to demo is using JHipster with MySQL. I'm going to create a new directory. And Workspace directory. and start over again. So I'm going to call this MySQL app. I'll use the session authentication, SQL, MySQL. And this time for development, I'm going to use MySQL as well. We'll keep all the rest of the defaults. So I'm going to change to my new workspace. I'm going to go to MySQL. I'm going to create a new schema. We're going to import the POM for the MySQL app. Again, we can ignore these errors. So one thing you have to do when you are using the database is you have to make sure that your URL to your database is correct. If you had made a different name for your schema, you would have to change that here. In my case, the default, I used MySQL app, which is the default. You can see there are no tables in MySQL app currently. So we will run this as a Java application. Refresh. Now we have tables in our new schema that are the default tables that JHipster generates to run the screens that I showed before. You'll see that there's some default data also added in, for instance, the user table for a system user, anonymous, admin, a regular user. Here's some auditing tables. So some of the things that are generated related to the database. Domain objects are generated. For instance, this user entity. And you'll see it's a standard JPA entity, table name, entity annotation, and the various fields with annotations. Also, you'll notice that it extends this abstract auditing entity. So if you need auditing on a table, you can extend this. Make sure you have the 4 columns: created by, created date, last modified by, last modified date, and you will get auditing on your table out of the box. Also, repository classes are created. So we'll see in a second when you create a new table that the repository is just empty because it just has the standard CRUD operations in it. However, in this case, user has some custom finders, so they're mentioned here. And there's also a REST resource. And we'll show that after I generate a new table. So to create a new table, there is a command line option to do that. If you wanted to create, for instance, a customer, you run JHipster:entity, and that will start the entity creation process for you. Whatever name you put after will be the name of the entity. So the first thing it's going to ask is, do you want to add a field to your entity? So you can say, yes, I want a first name. What's the data type? So we'll go with string. Yes, we'll add another field. Let's do last name. String. Yes. Date of birth. Can be a local date. And no more fields. This is where you can add relationships to other tables. Discuss that in a moment. For now, no. And there, that code has been generated for the new entity. So a repository has been created, a REST resource has been created. I'll talk about Liquibase. A Liquibase file has been generated. Some boilerplate HTML for administration has been created. A test has been created. Some JSON files. We'll take a look. So I'll refresh the application. Now you see there's a customer. Customer has a first name, last name, and a date of birth with some custom JSON serialization for dates. A repository has been created, which is empty. A REST resource has been created, and it has the basic CRUD operations already made for you. So if you post to customers, you will create a new customer. If you do a get to /customers, you'll get all the customers. You can get a customer by ID, and you can delete a customer. That's all generated. So the initial code, the initial generation of the database is done with Liquibase. There's a Liquibase file. So this initial schema includes all the tables that I showed earlier, the user table and audit tables. So this is just the Liquibase XML generated table, indexes, there's primary key, foreign keys, and there's even loading default data, like the user table with the standard users in it, and there's some CSV files over here that actually feed that data. So that's all Liquibase. There's a master Liquibase XML file, and that has all the different Liquibase files that you will have over time when you change the schema. So you'll see the first item is here, and then the second item is the new one for this customer entity that was just created. If we take a look at that one, it's pretty basic. So the ID, first name, last name, date of birth have been created in the Liquibase file. On the Angular side, a new entity has been created called customer, and it supports some CRUD operations using the REST resource that was generated as well. I'll show you that in action. Started the application. Now you'll see there's a customer entity. So if you click on that, you get a screen that's been generated for us. It allows you to create a new customer. There's date picker functionality as well, if you'd rather use that than typing in the date. So we save this new customer. If we go back to the database, you see we have a customer table now with the first name, last name, date of birth. And we will have Bob Smith now added as a customer. We can edit. And we can delete all from this screen here. So that was all generated for us by JHipster. The next thing I'm going to show you is a relationship with JHipster. So I'm going to create products and a cart with a many-to-many relationship. So I'm going to create a product. It's going to have a name and a price. And I'm going to add a relationship to another entity, which is going to be a cart. It's going to be many-to-many. Is this entity the owner? No, it is not. No more relationships. So now a product entity has been created. But you'll see it doesn't compile. It has a relationship to a cart, and cart hasn't been created yet. So the next thing to do is to create the cart entity. And I'm not going to, I just add the one field for demonstration. And we're going to have a relationship. The relationship is going to be to product. It's many-to-many. This will be the owner. Then it asks, when you display this relationship, and this is basically just for the generated administration screen, which field from product do you want to use? So I'm going to use name. No more relationships. So if we refresh again, the code will compile. So now cart exists. You see it has the many-to-many annotation related to products. Products has many-to-many, or cart and to carts. And you can see here that the Liquibase file was created for product and for cart. Cart is the more interesting one. So because this is the owner, Cart is also creating the join table for the many-to-many relationship called tcart tproduct and setting up the foreign keys in that table. The cart repository has one extra method already generated by JHipster to pull a cart and the products together. So we'll start the application. You'll see a cart, the cart product join table, and a product. Now there are a product and cart entities, so we can create a new product. Add a few products here. We go to cart. And we can select one or more of the products. And the UI, of course, can't really show that. It's not quite complex enough to show that relationship. But if you look in the database, you see we have our two products. We have our cart. We added the shoes, so that's ID 2. In the join table, you'll see product ID 2 joined with cart ID 1. And that is how the entity generation works standalone and with relationships between tables. Of course, you can model many-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, one-to-one. The last thing I'm going to show you is a chat application that I generated with JHipster, the initial, and then modified to do chat. So I used the WebSockets generation. That was one of the options when you run Yo JHipster. So when you want to add a screen to the base JHipster app, one of the ways you can do that is modify the menu. So the menu uses this navbar.html file. And so I just copied basically the home menu item and made a new menu item called chat. And I had to pick, well, I didn't have to, but I picked a new glyph icon for that. And here is the JSON key to internationalize the menu option. So this is actually not used. there is a global JSON that's used for the menu in whatever languages you selected. So I had to add chat here inside the menu for that to display properly. Also, you need to have a JSON file for each page as well. So I have one for my chat page, even though I'm not actually using it. I had to create one empty to keep from having problems. So what I had to do is add a service. That's the pattern that's used in JHipster. Add a Angular service that would actually communicate with the backend to make chat work over the sockets. So most of this code was copied from someone on the internet who created a chat application. I only had to tweak a few things, but all this code here, if you look at the presentation I did, there's a reference link to the site where I got this code. The main thing is you have to pick a URL that's going to be the URL for your sockets, and that's where we're using /chat. So this actually calls out to /chat on the Spring side to do the communication. The other pattern that's followed in JHipster is underneath the app directory, you put your state provider for your page. So that kind of says this URL is the URL that I want to hit to get to my page, and also tells what the controller is going to be and what the HTML file is going to be. So this was copied from existing and just tweaked for chat. The controller is your standard Angular controller for the page. In this case, all I'm doing is allowing people to type a message in that'll get sent over the WebSocket, and then each browser will then receive messages as well. So the two methods are just add message and receive callback. The HTML is very basic. It's a form with a text area entry and a submit button. And the submit button calls add message that was in the controller. Then below that form, we actually just display whatever messages are in the messages object, which was modified here when messages are received from the socket. One thing you have to make sure you do is include your new files in the index HTML where all the scripts are included. Now for the Java side, this WebSocket configuration file or Java file was generated by JHipster when I said I wanted to use WebSockets. I had to add a config line here, /app, which is basically code that I got from the website that I needed. And then you have to register an endpoint. There's a tracker that comes with JHipster that you can run one browser and track the activity of another browser. Basically, you could have an administrator, for instance, log in 2 browsers, and while he's moving around in one browser, the other browser prints what screen that user goes to. That comes with JHipster. So I'm adding this chat in addition to that. So the service is very, very simple. The way this works is a message is received, it's passed in here, and it's just returned back out with a timestamp added to the message. So the only real difference between the input and output message is a timestamp. You can see here the message is just an ID and a string. The output message extends that and adds a date. That code was also copied from the website. I had to install a few modules. You can use Bower. After you install JHipster app, you can just run Bower from the command line and install any Angular module you want by doing Bower install. I had to install underscore for the JavaScript code that I borrowed to work. See underscore, and then the actual JavaScript, the actual Angular module that I'm using to do the chat is the Spring ng chat, and that's the module you can Google and see all this code that I've used here. So if we run this chat application, we now have a new menu option called chat. So the chat screen looks like this. You type in a message, you hit send, messages will show up down below. So we'll also open up a different browser. So we have 2 different browsers. And we'll see that the message showed up on the other browser. And vice versa. So this is using WebSockets, JHipster, with just a few tweaks. Took about a day to put it together. Main problems I had were actually more with the chat code than anything to do with JHipster. So the final thing you can do is deploy this application to the cloud. And you'll see here I have now an empty cloud space, no applications, no services. So now I'm in the directory where my application is. And I just tell JHipster I want to deploy this application in Cloud Foundry. Default name is fine. Dev sounds good. This is a database service which I'm not currently using for chat. I'm just using the local database, but that's there. So the WAR file is being uploaded automatically to the cloud. Then the application is being started. Go back to the cloud. And you'll see that the application has been deployed there. And there you have it. It's in the cloud with chat. This time I'll log in as user. And you'll see the chat application works in the cloud as well. And that concludes the demo. Be sure to check out the slides as well. Thank you.